Good evening. Today is Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021. I'm Heather Peffley, clerk for the City of Manistee. The City Council's March 2nd, 2021 regular meeting being conducted remotely, where all members of the City Council are in separate locations and not at the City Hall Council chambers, will be called to order by Mayor Roger Zelensky shortly. As always, this meeting is being recorded and will be broadcast on Manistee TV cable channels 189 and 190 and available at manisteetv.org. City Council and City staff will have video and audio available for this meeting. Members of the public will be audio only. The microphones of all members of the City Council, City Manager, City Attorney, and the City Clerk will always be live unless there's an audio disruption. Mayor Zelensky, we are ready to proceed with the meeting.
Thank you, Heather. We'll call the meeting to order. Please take the roll.
Councilmember Bachman.
Here.
Councilmember Beaton.
Here.
Mayor Zelensky.
Here.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Szymanski.
Here.
Councilmember Grabowski.
Here.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac.
Here.
City Manager.
Here.
City Attorney.
Here.
Deputy Clerk. Here. DPW Director.
Here.
Finance Director.
Here.
Planning and Zoning Director.
Here.
Police Chief. Police Chief.
Can you hear me?
Oh, there I gotcha. Fire Chief.
Heather, he had to go assist on a run, so he's unavailable for a while.
Okay. And City Engineer.
Here.
Roll call complete.
Thank you. Citizens' comments on agenda-related items. Each person in the virtual waiting room will be called individually by the city clerk by the last 4 digits of their telephone number. Individuals will be asked if they have a comment or if they are passing. It is very important that those giving comments have a good phone connection and no sound or noise in the background. If there is, it will be disruptive audio. If the issue cannot be corrected by the caller, we'll move on to the next person in line. The meeting discussion topics for those who don't have an agenda tonight are a long list. Under the consent agenda, we have approval of minutes, cash balance, revenue and expenses, and notification regarding next work session. Other agenda items, consideration of amendment to the Manistee City Ordinance Chapter 650 anti-blight, consideration of local revenue sharing board grant application, consideration of changing the polling locations of precinct 1 and 2 for future elections, consideration of approving amendment to the Manistee Township Utility Agreement, consideration of a contract award and a change order number 1 for the Phase 2 Contract A wastewater collection system improvements, consideration of contract award and change order number 1 for Phase 2 Contract B clean water recovery facility improvements, consideration of bond authorizing ordinance for the issuance of a sewer junior lien revenue bond series 2021A and 2021B in an aggregate amount of $18 million. Consideration of a USDA Rural Development Loan Resolution for $9,100,000 and $8,900,000 per sewer revenue bond indebtedness. Consideration of a text amendment to the zoning ordinance to address street, ground level, and low level dwelling standards. Consideration of a text amendment to the zoning ordinance to address residential dwellings design standards. Consideration of a text amendment to the zoning ordinance to address patios. Consideration of a text amendment to the zoning ordinance to address temporary storage structures. Consideration of a text amendment to the zoning ordinance to address the site plan review committee. Consideration of a text amendment to the zoning ordinance to address fences. We'll now take public comments. Heather?
I have one member of the public. Telephone number ending in 1880. If you have a comment, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Telephone number 1880, do you have a comment?
Sorry, pass.
Thank you. That is all we have for public comment.
Thank you. Consent agenda. All items marked with an asterisk are on the consent agenda and considered by the city manager to be routine matters. Prior to the approval of a consent agenda, any member of council may have an item from the consent agenda removed and taken up during the regular portion of the meeting. Consent agenda items tonight include approval of minutes, cash balance, revenue and expenses, notification regarding next work session. Any council member want an item removed? Hearing none, at this time, council could take action to approve the consent agenda as presented. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Manistee, make a motion.
Second, is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Please take the roll.
Councilmember Beaton,
Yes.
Councilmember Sullivan,
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski,
Yes.
Councilmember Bachman,
Yes.
Mayor Zielinski,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Schmansky,
Yes.
and Councilmember Martin Pontiac.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Unfinished business. Consideration of amendments to the Manistee City Ordinance Chapter 650 and Blight. Amendments have been made by the city attorney to Ordinance Chapter 650 anti-blight. These changes allow for more efficient enforcement of the ordinance by the police department. As an ordinance, 2 separate readings are required. This ordinance was introduced at the February 16, 2021 meeting and could be adopted at this time. At this time, council will take action to adopt the proposed amendment to the Manistee City Ordinance Chapter 650 anti-blight. Is there a motion?
Grabowski, I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
You have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, please take the roll.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac,
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Schmansky,
Yes.
Councilmember Sullivan,
Yes.
Mayor Zielinski,
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton,
Yes.
Councilmember Bachman.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. New business. Consideration of a local revenue sharing board grant application. The local revenue sharing board distributes 2% monies from the Little River Casino. The deadline for 2021 Cycle 1 applications is Friday, March 5th, 2021 at 5 p.m. City staff has prepared 2 grant applications for submission to the local revenue sharing board. This agenda item will include 2 separate motions, one for each grant application. At this time, council could take action to submit the grant application to the local revenue sharing board for the fire department Lucas 3 mechanical CPR devices in the amount of $8,000. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll
second
support
Grabowski.
Bachman.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, please take the roll.
Councilmember Grabowski,
Yes.
Councilmember Bachman,
Yes.
Mayor Zielinski,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Schmansky,
Yes.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac,
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton,
Yes.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. At this time, council could take action to authorize the submission of a grant application to the local revenue sharing board for the police department for, I'll turn the page, 8 body worn cameras in the amount of $13,376. Is there a motion?
Chemansky,
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, please take the roll.
Councilmember Sullivan,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Schmansky,
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski,
Yes.
Member Martin Pontiac,
Yes.
Councilmember Bachman,
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton,
Yes.
Mayor Zelinski.
Yes,
Motion passed.
thank you. Consideration of changing the polling location for precinct 1 and 2 for further elections. The City Election Commission has recommended a change in the polling locations for precinct 1 and 2 and is requesting council approval to establish a central polling location for future elections. The reason for this request is to not only improve the efficiency of the election process, but to provide convenience for voters. The current polling locations are small and can become very crowded during busy elections. The location being proposed is the Manistee Council on Aging, located at 260 St. Mary's Parkway. According to MCL 168-662(2), the legislative body of each city may establish a central polling place or places for 6 precincts or less if it is possible and convenient for the electors to vote in the central polling place. The legislative body may abolish other polling places not required as a result of the establishment of a central polling place. The city attorney has drafted the polling place use agreement and recommended by the Secretary of State. If approved, this change will take effect after May 4th, 2021 election to provide time to send notice and new voting ID cards to all registered voters in the city of Manistee. Heather, do you want to kind of bring us up to speed on your reasoning for this change?
Sure. This has been coming for a little while. If you remember, back in 2018, we were at St. Joe. We used to be on the upstairs of the parish center, and we moved to the lower level because in the upstairs, they have different dinners and events, and it really is against the state rules to have an election where there is any type of public event taking place. So we moved to the lower level, which has worked, but is very crowded, the same as the marina. And this has, when we have a busy election or a larger election, this means that voters a lot of times have to stand outside. And we have November elections, which we don't usually know how that weather is going to be. This past year, of course, with COVID, we ran into some even bigger issues with social distancing. So it brought us, our capacity down even more. So the space really showed, that we needed more room. And on top of that, in 2018, we had the proposal 3 passed. And with that, there were several changes to how the election process in Michigan is run. And one of those changes was same-day voter registration, which means that the clerk or deputy clerk have to remain at City Hall the entire election day, one of us does, to process those same-day voter registrations. This can make it really difficult for the other person to go from one location to another. We have precinct 1, precinct 2. We now have both precincts in an AV counting board and, running back and forth. And then at the end of the day, also trying to help them close. It's just been difficult. So we decided to start looking around the city to see where we could possibly hold these elections. We looked at the Armory Youth Center, which was a wonderful location. It would have served for both precincts to be there. However, the students after school would be pushed into a smaller part of the building. I didn't know how that would work with people trying to work around the students. There's only one means of ingress and egress there, which makes it a little difficult. We have that at our current locations, and I was really looking for something that would provide a little more just accessibility. So we decided to go look at the Wagner Center, the Manistee Council on Aging, and they have 2 separate locations. What used to be the church, and then also the activity center. So we would be able to house both precinct 1 and precinct 2 in separate but central locations. There is 2 means of ingress and egress to each of those areas. and plenty of room for people to be waiting inside. I had the county clerk and our deputy clerk go with me to tour this location. I spoke with the county clerk about it. I said, you know, how do you feel about us having this location on the north side? I know right now we have separate locations. I asked her if she thought that would be an inconvenience. She said, with the size of our jurisdiction, it's going to be a change, but she didn't feel that it would be an inconvenience. And she felt that the changes of having people wait inside, the size, just everything about the location was going to far exceed any negative by moving these. So it just was a win-win for everyone to have this central location with the space. Yeah, and it worked out. So we decided to take it to the election commission. We explained everything and they agreed and asked us to bring the recommendation to council.
Thank you, Heather. Before we move on to the motions, does anybody have any questions for Heather?
I just have a comment. I actually got a letter of support for this from a resident who was quite happy that we were moving the polling spot and that it would not be in a school and it would not be in a church for perhaps some subliminal, you know, psychological reasons that would influence voters. She was very, very supportive. So I just wanted to pass that on.
Thank you. I'm happy to hear that.
Anybody?
Yeah, Heather, this is Mick Szymanski, and again, very good package, and I agree that the facility certainly meets all of our criteria. My only concern is that we're going to have construction on our bridges over the next couple of years, and you know, Murphy is alive and well, and my concern is that we would literally divide our city into half. And if something happened to the bridge where we had issues, then what kind of a fallback system would we have to allow voters to vote if they couldn't get across the bridge? And again, I've been in situations in other cities where you couldn't get from one side to the other. And I just felt that was a concern. I think it's a great idea. Certainly the marina is not adequate in any means for a polling place, even for, you know, half of the city. But I do have some concerns with that. And if there was any other kind of a failure, do we have an opportunity to have some kind of backup resource to be able to have it in another facility if something happened?
Well, with that being said, we have a lot of voters on the north side who, if, you know, we keep the locations where they are and the bridges go out,
right,
they can't get there either. So, you know, we do have registered voters on both sides of the bridge. So that is always a possibility. Knock on wood, we haven't had that problem yet. I believe that I'm not asking to abolish the other two locations with this. I would keep those options open. The only bad thing is you need to have 60 days before an election, unless it's an emergency, to change a location. So if there was an emergency and we had to move to another location, we could, you know, the marina is a city building. We could always keep that open on that date as a backup if needed. And I know that St. Joe would, you know, help us out as well. So we could always go back to our current locations if there was an emergency. I did think about that. You know, there's always a possibility. But again, I tried to weigh it out as well. I have voters on both sides of the bridge. So that's, you know, always been a possibility no matter where we've been. So.
Right. My only comment is we're going to be down to one bridge for probably 2 years, right? We're going to be down one bridge while they fix Maple, and then we're going to switch over and be down when they fix the Memorial Bridge. That was my point, is that
right,
you have a much greater chance of having a problem with only one operational bridge connecting the city.
Right.
That's my only thought. And as long as there is an opportunity to make an adjustment, that's fine.
Anybody else? Hearing none, at this time, council could take action to approve the change to the election polling locations for precinct 1 and 2 and establish a new central polling location for the city of Manistee and authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign the polling place use agreement. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion. This is Beaton.
I'll second.
Okay.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Comments? Hearing none, please take the roll.
Councilmember Bachman,
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton,
Yes.
Mayor Zielinski,
Yes.
Councilmember Sullivan,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Szymanski,
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski,
Yes.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Consideration of approving amendments to the Manistee Township Utility Agreement. The city of Manistee and Manistee Township have a utility agreement for public water and sanitary sewer owned by the city, located within Manistee Township. Review completed by both parties have indicated that additional clarification was required to define when existing structures were required to connect to the city utility system. The Manistee Township Board has approved the proposed amendment. At this time, council could take action to approve the proposed amendment to the Manistee Township Utility Agreement. Is there a motion?
Szymanski, I'll make the motion.
I'll second. Martin Pontiac.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I have one question. Mr. Mikula, what does it take from a mechanical side to make this happen? Is this a major undertaking, or is this turning a couple of valves someplace?
Turning a couple valves to accomplish what, sir?
To connect for on this to connect the township sewer and water.
So when these agreements were put in place, there was language that required the township to compel existing customers to tie into our utilities where they existed. And George, help me out if I misstate this, but the amendments basically help define who and when, what parcels and when they would actually have to connect to the city, and then define the distance that the land or the structure, how close they have to be before they're compelled to tie in. For the sanitary, it simply would be extending a tap from our gravity sewer to the existing piping on the structure. And for a well or for water, they would need to tap the city main and then connect it to their plumbing and install a meter.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further?
Hey, Jeff, is Manistee Township requiring everybody along 31 to sign up for they get the sewer service and the water service?
Well, I believe that the commercial structures were compelled to tie in at the time that this agreement was effected. And I believe that it only required the residential to tie in if and when they had a failure of either their existing septic or existing well. And then certainly all new construction would need to tie in if they are within 200 feet of our services. Along 31, for the sanitary side, it's mostly a forced main. It's a pressure pipe. And so those customers are not required to tie in, but where there's gravity sewer, they would be under those conditions.
Okay.
Anything further? Hearing none, please take the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Szymanski,
Yes.
Councilmember Sullivan,
Yes.
Mayor Zielinski,
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton,
Yes.
Councilmember Bachman,
Yes.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac,
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Consideration of a contract award and change order number 1 for the Phase 2 Contract A wastewater collection system improvements. The project has been designed and publicly bid to construct a new pipeline conveyance from SSO 18 to the WWTP. One bid was received as follows. Pollack Contracting Incorporated, $4,749,490.95. The engineer estimate was $3 million. Pollack Contracting Incorporated is a confirmed low bidder. In order to bring the project cost closer to budget amount, a change order was recommended to include value engineering items. The resulting contract amount will be $3,864,094.80. At this time, council could take action to award a contract to low bidder Pollack Contracting Incorporated in the amount of $4,749,490.95 and execute a change order number 1 in the amount of minus $885,396.15 and authorize the city clerk and mayor to execute the documents. Is there a motion?
Grabowski,
I'll make the motion.
Need a second?
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion or questions?
I've got a couple of questions. On the, I can understand, you know, with all the things going on, how prices have gotten higher. First question is I was reading through the documents and I'm assuming that all of these changes are not going to affect the longevity or the ability for the system to work as designed. Is that correct?
This is Makula. That is absolutely correct.
Okay. So a lot of the, you know, I don't know the, you know, I know they were talking about replacing steel piping with the, I think that's the other project, but I don't know if that was included in this as well, with plastic or steel with plastic lined piping. Does that have the same durability in cold weather as the steel?
I will answer that in a broad sense. When the engineers go through and do this design, obviously they're selecting materials and various components that meet the design standards and the design life. When we go through the engineering process or the value engineering process, we're sitting down with the contractors and finding out where there were unique surprises. So one example is just the simple fittings that were specified. For some reason, they are in high demand and their cost has, you know, quadrupled and even more than that. And so the engineers then went back and found fittings that met the same requirements, but were more readily in supply. So all of the changes that we are proposing here, I do not feel diminish the end result of either of the projects. And, you know, some things are obviously one way to design it on paper versus another way to construct it. There's different viewpoints, different experiences. And so sometimes the value engineering is very healthy. But I would say that what is proposed meets the objectives of our wet weather corrective action program and does not compromise the end product.
Okay, thank you. And then the follow-on question is, will the price increase? What impact will that have? Will it change potential rates for sewer and water, or will we be able to absorb this?
Well, when we started off this whole program, we went through the engineer's estimates and we applied for rural development phase 1 and phase 2 bonding. At some point, rural development came back to us and said, you know what, we're seeing a lot of these projects come in much higher than what you should expect. And we actually came back to council and we approved a higher bonding limit for both of the projects, just in anticipation that the cost would come in higher. With these two bid packages, we are proposing to borrow up to the limit of what council has approved through rural development. We had also set aside some cash reserves, and the primary source of that was the $400,000 tie-in fee that Filer Township paid to the city several years ago. We've saved that cash to be able to front end the expenses of this project before we could get reimbursement. So you have to understand that there's been over $1,200,000 that the city has spent to date that we have not been reimbursed for, just to get the contracts to the point where we can get them approved by council. And we cannot request any reimbursement from the loans until we have our pre-construction meeting and actually have the official closing of the project. So we've been working with the finance director's office to make sure that we can cash flow a lot of that. And we will need to use some of that cash that we've reserved for this purpose to be able to pay for the end product of this. So to answer your question, at the amounts that we're proposing today, it does not appear, and Ed, you're still working on some of these numbers for the budget, but it should not have a significant impact on the rates.
That's correct, Jeff. At this point, it looks like we'll be able to maintain the 3.5% inflationary adjustment. However, I will temper that with the fact we haven't gone through the 2021 budgets yet. But that's what it's looking like with preliminary projections.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Okay, hey Jeff, I was reading through line by line of this whole big contract, and on page 118, I noticed it says land acquisition will be paid for by utility funds. Well, utility funds are going to be paying for some land.
Well, we already purchased 10 acres of land from Morton Salt, adjacent to the treatment plant, and that'll be the site of the new improvements. And like I said, we maintain, or we held that $400,000 of tap-in fees from Filer Township specifically to cover the cost of that land acquisition, knowing that we would need to buy the land ahead of when we could get reimbursement from the feds.
Okay.
Anybody else? Hearing none, please take the roll.
Mayor Zielinski,
Yes.
Councilmember Sullivan,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Szymanski,
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski,
Yes.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac,
Yes.
Councilmember Bachman,
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Consideration of a contract award and change order number 1 for the phase 2 contract B clean water recovery facility improvements. The project has been designed and publicly bid to construct the new headworks and storage facility at the WWTP. For bids, the 4 bids were received as follows: Grand River Construction, $14,953,130. RCL Construction, $15,670,000. Spence Brothers, $15,733,000. Haney, $19,608,067. non-responsive bid. Engineer estimate was $11,900,000. Grand River Construction is the confirmed low bidder. In order to bring the project cost closer to the budgeted amount, a change order is recommended to include value engineering items. The resulting contract amount will be $12,290,280. At this time, council could take action to award a contract to low bidder Grand River Construction in the amount of $14,953,130 and execute a change order number 1 in the amount of minus $2,662,850 and authorize the city clerk and mayor to execute the documents. Is there a motion?
Szymanski, I'll make the motion.
Bachman will second it.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion or questions?
Yeah, Jeff, could you explain what you mean by a new headworks and storage facilities at the wastewater treatment plant?
Sure. The previous contract that you awarded is basically going to take all the sewage and combined with the wet weather flows, the stormwater that normally or currently gets discharged to Manistee Lake or goes to the treatment plant. That bigger pipeline will take everything to the treatment plant. So we're upgrading it from a 36-inch pipeline to a new 48-inch pipeline. Once it gets to the treatment plant, the headworks is designed to take all those flows and do grit removal. So it takes all the dirt, sand, and that sort of thing out of it. It also has primary screening. So any of the large particles or garbage and debris that's in the sewage comes out of it. And then the different tanks and channels have separate weir levels in them, so that the normal flows will go to the plant just as they do today. But it's set up so that when the flows exceed what the plant can treat, then the excess flows will tip into a new pump station, and that pump station will fill three separate above ground tanks that are going to be built, and we will store that sewage until the flows reduce. And when the plant then has capacity again, we will drain those tanks back out and run them through the treatment process. So today, all that excess flow gets discharged to Manistee Lake. When this project is completed, we will store those excess flows and then treat them as the treatment plant has capacity to do so. It is also designed and is permitted that if we get some massive storm event that even exceeds what the state design guidelines require us to treat and store, then everything that goes into those tanks has already received primary treatment, which is all the solids have been removed from it. And it will go through a disinfection process where any pathogens or that sort of thing get eliminated, and then those emergency overflows can then go to the to Manistee Lake. And so it brings us up to the highest standard of treatment that's, the way that the plants are being built today.
Okay.
I have a question. This is a huge project, both of these two items that we've looked at tonight. I'm curious, and I think I really need to know the answer to this. Who is for example, when Grand River Construction comes in, who is going to be on the city side working with Grand River? Is that going to be Spicer? Is it going to be, and if it's Spicer, at what level? Who's going to be supervising it? I think I need to know so I understand the process a little bit better. They're not just going to come in and do the whole thing without having constant communication with somebody at the city level. So how is that going to work, Jeff?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And honestly, it's going to get handled the way that all of our construction projects get handled. This one is, this is really an historic project for the community.
Right.
And Spicer will have on-site full-time representation, doing inspections and testing. The city will have, you know, myself and then designees from the treatment plant will certainly be involved on a daily basis through all the construction. And then, but there's really a whole team between the city and the engineers, a whole team of us. There's not just one engineer with Spicer that puts this together. Brian House was the lead engineer, but there's separate engineers for the electrical, for the hydraulics, for the plumbing, for the underground. You know, it takes quite a bit of specialties, and this is over a 1.5 year contract. So the construction is going to be spread over time, and the dollar amounts are high, but it's very sequential. I mean, they're going to have to drive piles and do the deep excavations and the underground piping. Then the next step will be to do the concrete work. And then once the concrete work's in, then there's a lot of plumbing. And I mean, if you think about how a house is built, there's a lot of different steps that get you up through there and different contractors and subcontractors that work on it. But it's going to take a lot of our effort. I've put into our budgets overtime for our staff, because whenever we're taking on big projects like this, it takes, you know, extra hours and extra efforts. And then we've already got the construction administration contracts completed with the engineer.
Okay, quick question, and I'm curious. Has Spicer, I know they have offices in other places in Michigan, has Spicer worked with Grand River before?
Yeah, this is Sean with Spicer Group. I have not personally, or Brian hasn't, but our company has worked with them. And we also spent some time making phone calls, talking with, you know, some different references. And Grand River comes with a good reputation in the wastewater treatment plant, specifically building plants. They do a lot of that work. And so everything we've heard has been positive, but I haven't personally worked directly with them. But through second hand, I'm very comfortable with them being able to complete this project.
Well, Sean, are you going to be working with them when they come to town, or is that going to be somebody else?
It'll be all of us. Like, I guess just to expand a little bit on what Jeff said, we're under contract with the city and obligated to basically have an on-site representative. And the purpose of that, you know, the main purposes we have is we're making sure that contract is getting built to the plans and specifications, and we're acting as the owner's rep. You know, we're basically the on-site technical representative for the city. So it's our job to document the job for one, and track payments and changes and all those things. But really, the main thing you have us out there for is to make sure we're building it to the plan. They're building it to the plans and specs, and it satisfies the contract. So,
okay.
Councilwoman Beaton,
many of us.
Yeah.
I don't know if the city manager was able to get it forwarded today, but late this afternoon, we actually got a letter from Rural Development that they have done a review of these contracts and the proposed change orders. They have approved them on their side. They have also done the federal reviews of the contractors and ensured that they are, from the federal government's perspective, they meet the qualifications and to be able to award the contract. There's a lot of scrutiny when you're borrowing the rural development money. And so we've passed all those hurdles.
Well, that's always reassuring. And it's also, like you said, or somebody said earlier, this is a historic project.
Yes.
And just want to be able to reassure people who, if they ask me questions, that they might ask me something like that and I have the answers. Thank you.
Anybody else? Hearing none, please take the roll.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac,
Yes.
Councilmember Bachman,
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton,
Yes.
Mayor Zelinski,
Yes.
Councilmember Sullivan,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Szymanski,
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski.
yes,
Motion passed.
Thank you. Consideration of a bond authorizing ordinance for the issuance of a sewer junior lien revenue bond series 2021A and 2021B in the aggregate amount of $18 million. The city is subject to an MDEQ NPDES permit that mandates a wet weather correction action plan to remove the last combined sewer overflow. This requirement and progress towards completion of completion has been discussed many times at the past council work sessions and meetings. A notice of intent resolution was approved by council on August 22nd, 2017 for the issuance of debt to finance the needed activities to comply with the correction action plan. No referendums, petitions were filed, so the city can proceed with issuing additional debt. The Series 2021 bond, which funds Phase 2A and Phase 2B, and an overall correction action plan are being financed by USDA Rural Development. The approval of the bond authorizing ordinance is necessary to authorize and proceed with the bond issuance. At this time, council could take action to approve the bond authorizing ordinance for the issuance of a sewer junior lien revenue bond series 2021A and 2021B in an aggregate amount of $18 million. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion, Bachman.
Szymanski, I'll second.
Motion is second. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, please take the roll.
Councilmember Beaton,
Yes.
Councilmember Bachman, Councilmember Bachman,
Yes.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac,
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski,
yes,
Mayor Pro Tem Szymanski,
Yes.
Councilmember Sullivan,
Yes.
Mayor Zelinski.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Consideration of USDA Rural Development Loan Resolution for $9,100,000 and $8,900,000 for sewer revenue bond indebtedness. The city is subject to an MDEQ NPDES permit that mandates the wet weather correction action program to remove the last combined sewer overflow. This requirement and progress towards completion has been discussed many times in past work sessions and meetings. The Series 2021 bond will fund Phase 2A and Phase 2B of the overall correction action plan are being financed by USDA Rural Development. The USDA requires loan resolution as part of the financing process. At this time, council could approve USDA Rural Development loan resolutions in the amount of $9,100,000 and $8,900,000 and for sewer revenue bond indebtedness. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion, Bachman.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, please take the roll.
Councilmember Bachman,
Yes.
Mayor Zelinski,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Szymanski,
Yes.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac,
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton,
Yes.
Councilmember Sullivan,
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski.
yes,
Motion passed.
Thank you. Consideration of a text amendment to the zoning ordinance to address street, ground level, and lower level dwelling standards. Staff were instructed to develop language for the street, ground level, and lower level dwelling standards within the C3 commercial district. Language has been approved by the Planning Commission. As an ordinance, two separate readings are required. If this ordinance is introduced at this time, it could be adopted at the next meeting. At this time, council could take action to introduce zoning ordinance C21-01 with the proposed text amendments addressing street, ground level, and lower level dwelling standards. Is there a motion?
Grabowski, I'll make a motion.
Szymanski, I'll second.
Motion is second. Any discussion?
We are making this change in the ordinance for the new development. Is that correct?
It's for new and existing development. It's for new and existing. So the new developments will be considered mixed use, but the existing ones, it allows them to come in and utilize this as a lower story dwelling, as well as which is really like a basement more dwelling with the walkouts in the back that you see along River Street. It allows for the utilization of some of those back areas of the buildings to be developed into housing for along River Street, and allows for flexibility for some of those business owners down there, where they only have to use 40% of their building for commercial use. And some of them are longer, where they can develop those into, a rental unit or, a livable unit for themselves.
But if they're going to be used for residential, like apartments, they're not going to be on the street, say on River Street, on that level, are they, or not?
Yes, they can be on that level. They're supposed to have separate entrances. There is a 40% requirement on here that you can see under the section here. Give me 1 second to find it again. I apologize.
Linda, but the way it's written, the housing would not be off of River Street. It would be, the front would still be retail.
Right.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to clarify that. It would be the
backside. And actually there's some examples, even without the ordinance, where people have kind of done that already. So part of this is bringing a number of places that have already done it, where they have an apartment on the back looking over the river and then retail in front.
Right.
That's what I thought. That's what I was kind of getting at. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't a direct entryway into an apartment on the ground floor facing the street.
You have 1505 section H, 40% of the street / ground floor accessory dwelling shall be reserved for commercial space. This reservation of commercial space shall front / line with the public road, not an alley, and shall extend into the building for 40% of the street / ground floor area. There's also provision in here for separate entrances and exits. And then the subterranean areas are allowed to be developed as well under this amendment.
I got a question. What are you going to do for parking? Because some of these places, if they put a lower level facing the channel, where are they going to park? Because we already have a problem with people parking on River Street that own businesses or work at these businesses. So if you add apartments.
Well, we're trying to develop some flexibility in that, but I mean, there's been a lot of cities that are not providing parking for their residents. So, that's not unheard of, especially in Northwest Michigan, in some of the northern areas. You guys do have public parking lots, and they can be utilized by the residents in those areas. You have a very good public transportation system that can also be utilized. If there's also a lot of evidence that supports this, called the cost of free parking, where it says, there's a cost associated with that you guys are seeing with, with providing parking for these residents. It's not necessarily a requirement. You also have regulations within the ordinance that allow for within 200 feet of an area to, if the market dictates that there should be a parking spot for them, then they basically will provide one. They only have to do it within 200 feet of the residence, so by the ordinance. So they could potentially purchase other land and then provide parking to those residents if they deem that the market deems that they should do so.
Okay, well, we already have a problem with parking downtown, so where would you purchase land to add more parking?
There are some lots that are available. Not all the land has been developed, or if you know, there's other outside areas that might be, you know, not necessarily directly in the C3 on River Street, areas that might be developed as an external parking lot, or somebody could come through as a parking facility even. We really don't want to, this is something that is currently that has been happening, and we're just allowing more flexibility to do so. We also seen support for this kind of development within the Rising Tide and Housing North recommended amendments that they came through with.
Anybody else? Hearing none, please take the roll.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac,
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton,
Yes.
Councilmember Sullivan,
No.
Councilmember Grabowski.
Oh. No,
I'm sorry.
no,
Councilmember Bachmann,
Yes.
Mayor Zelinski,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Szymanski.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Consideration of text amendment to the zoning ordinance to address residential dwelling design standards. Staff was instructed to develop language that would set standards for residential dwellings within the residential district, which has been approved by the Planning Commission. As an ordinance, 2 separate readings are required. If this ordinance is introduced at this time, it could be adopted at the next meeting. At this time, council could take action to introduce zoning ordinance Z21-02 with the proposed text amendments addressing standards for residential dwellings. Is there a motion?
Szymanski, I'll make the motion.
Grabowski, I'll second.
Motion is second. Any discussion?
Mike, could you describe a little bit on what exactly is in the package that we have?
Right. Yeah, this is this one's a little bit more difficult to read through. So
just give us kind of the general synopsis.
It took an area that, yeah, it took an area that you guys generally already had and kind of expanded on it to increase that you know, what the requirements are there. So they're basically saying, you know, that your principal and accessory dwellings have to match. You cannot have like a sheet metal structure with, you know, like a vinyl housing. They want them to match up with the primary dwelling. There was quite a big push, if you recall, from some citizens that wanted to have buildings face a certain way, match neighborhood structures. So when we were told to develop this, we kind of took that into consideration and said, hey, if the majority of the buildings face a certain way in a block, they need to tend to match. Similar materials to be used. But then we kind of took it a step back where we said, you know, this isn't the keep, you know, from, you know, designs that, you know, if you have a bunch of cookie cutter houses on the same block, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't, you know, deviate from that. If it's an innovative design, or, you know, you want to put solar energy in there, or you have a unique view, there's nothing really to prevent you from having a unique design to kind of, you know, take advantage of that. But what it primarily said was that you need to have your trim, your corner boards, your front porch enclosures, if it's open or closed, kind of matching, and really your orientation of the building, you know, to try to kind of match along those. And that's not to say that certain areas of the city that there isn't a deviation from that, but with there was a request by the Planning Commission to kind of develop some language that kind of fell in line with that. And so that we would see similar buildings within there, but also, you know, if there's a certain kind of design that needs to take advantage of a view or some other aspect that you guys were allowed to utilize, you know, a unique design to do so still. And it wasn't so restrictive that that wasn't allowed.
Anybody else?
So I think where I feel very uncomfortable with this in some areas is I really don't like to impede, you know, new ideas or new elements of design. And it's going to be very subjective by somebody in the permitting process as to whether, oh, they're taking advantage of a view or they're doing this. So I almost feel like this is very detailed. I'm more of a free-flowing kind of thinker, and I like people to be able to do what they want within certain setbacks. So there's quite a bit of this that really bothers me. But I think the second thing that bothers me too is I believe this all came about was because there was a little bit of, oh my gosh, look what they're doing over there kind of a thing going on in the city in a couple spots. And I understand that too, but if we were to pass something like this, is this going to stop anybody who's already pulled a permit, who's going to do something that deviates from this? Because
if anybody's,
when you're planning to build something and you're in the process, you don't want to have somebody say, oh, guess what? It's no longer allowable. So I do have a concern with that.
We would not be looking to go back and look at other permits that have been currently issued for, you know, before this design standard, if it is an amendment that is passed. And there is something that, there's a lot of validity to what you said. There's, you know, planners that say that, you know, different architectural standards within the same neighborhood from different time frames kind of can make up a unique neighborhood and make it unique. However, placemaking, you know, can say a different aspect of it. Like you know, for instance, our Victorian Port City, you know, in certain areas you'd want that to match. So, but in other areas you might not. But you know, we were instructed to come up with design standards, and that's really what we did. They were not as restrictive as some wanted, but you know, they're not as light as others may want them. But to say that there's not validity to what you said would be completely untrue. There's actually a lot of planning documentation out there that supports exactly what you said, that you know, neighborhoods should be made up of a variety of uses from a variety of different time periods, and to make them unique and actually, you know, fun to look at. So.
Yeah, some of our neighborhoods are, I don't think one developer came in and said, this whole subdivision is going to be ranch houses. I don't think that's really what happened. Like, here's 5 different floor plans to choose from. I mean, you'd be going back quite a few decades to figure that one out, I guess. But I guess I think I probably have said enough, but I just want to make sure that we're always moving forward and we can evolve. So if something new comes up, you know, there's less resistance to it. Go, oh, well, that actually looks rather nice, rather than, you know, throwing it out right away. So that's where I'm stuck on this.
Well,
but I know you spent a lot of time on it. I will tell you that I generally attend most of the Planning Commission meetings in the background, and I know how difficult it was to develop this. So I do appreciate all the effort that's been put into this.
Yeah, this is Mick, and you know, part of the challenge, I think, is that the way the ordinance is written, it does still allow for eclectic neighborhoods, but what it helps kind of prevent is, For example, we had somebody who wanted to build a steel pole barn with, you know, a 20-foot high garage door in the front so that they could store their RVs and their boats. And then they built a small little living space adjacent to it so that it could be considered a house with a garage.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a big steel building. Well, I'm not sure that, you know, Miss Beaton would appreciate that being built next door to her home, or Mr. Szymanski would appreciate it, or most people wouldn't necessarily want that kind of a structure. And again, it meets the criteria, but not the intent. And that's what we were trying to find, is a happy ground, so that we didn't have, you know, again, somebody building a place to store their summertime toys at the community's expense.
Right. This was debated I think 3 or 4 of the planning commission meetings, back and forth, trying to get a middle ground, if you will. You know, whether we accomplish that or not, you know, it could have gone further, it could have gone lighter. So, I mean, you know, overall, I could see both sides of it. So I think that there is a middle ground here. But whenever you have regulation on these types of things, I think there's a little level of hesitance, because it's never been done before. And at least in our area, you know, so, you know, I understand how we could look at this, and, you know, and that was one of the comments from one of the planning commission members was, how do we know that, you know, the pole barn structures that Mick spoke on in detail, that, you know, these aren't the new normal for, you know, resort communities, and that by not allowing them, we're hampering our development. You know, we really can't say, but for the residents that are in those areas, they might not appreciate it at all. And you know, some of them, you know, voice concern about other buildings that have come into place. So that's where these design standards came from originally, was concerns from residents that currently live here, that you know, there's types of buildings that are coming in that may not blend in with the neighborhood, or may not support you know, property values or other things within those areas. So
I got a quick question. Was there nothing in the ordinance before you redrafted this, like for the housing standards? I'm just thinking there's a house, I don't know the street, but it's over by the golf course, where there's a nice house, and then there's a sideways trailer. Like, was there nothing in the ordinance before?
that is where
that prevented that?
That was one of these that came in from this. That's on Bryan Avenue is where you're talking about.
Okay.
And it's actually one of the buildings that brought this about, was, hey, is there anything that we can do to prevent these types of structures from going in? You know, the neighborhood is generally not happy with it. And then there was another building that came in the very next month, which was exactly what Mick described. And there's absolutely no way to prevent that. Okay. So, you know, that's where this is coming from, this regulation. It's not necessarily, you know, there's examples of exactly what they're talking about, and that's why this was developed.
Okay, so if this goes into place, and something happens to either one of those dwellings to where they've got to be torn down or they're burnt down, they can't rebuild them in the same manner that they did with this new ordinance, right?
So I'd have to review the non-conforming structure areas as far as repair and fire damage to it. If it's a total loss, and apologize, I don't know off the top of my head, but it could either
if it's a total loss, they're going to have to meet setbacks, and if this were in place, that would be the case. Then they would have to follow these. Okay.
Thank you, Zach.
Yep.
Anybody else? Hearing none, please take the roll.
Councilmember Grabowski.
Yes.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac.
Yes.
Councilmember Bachmann,
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton,
I'm sorry, it's a no.
Mayor Zelinski,
Yes.
Councilmember Sullivan,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Szymanski.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Consideration of text amendment to the zoning ordinance to address patios. Often patios are exempt from permitting, provided they are at grade, do not exceed the maximum lot coverage for the district in which they are built, and are built within setbacks as approved by the Planning Commission. Language has been approved by the Planning Commission as an ordinance. 2 separate readings are required. If this ordinance is introduced at this time, it could be adopted at the next meeting. At this time, council could take action to introduce zoning ordinance Z21-03 with a proposed text amendment addressing patios. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion, Bachman.
Second, Grabowski.
If a motion is second, any discussion?
Yes, could Mike give us an idea on this thing? I'm kind of lost here.
Okay, so you guys have a section in the ordinance that you allow patios already within the front setback. And what this is doing is it's allowing patios within any setback, as long as they're not exceeding 200 square feet, they don't go to the maximum lot coverage, and they're built no closer than 3 feet from the property line. It's pretty common to see this kind of language within the within other ordinances, and we're just kind of bringing yours up to that standard. Usually when things are built at grade, you like sidewalks or pathways, they also, you know, are allowed within setbacks. So this is just kind of going along those standards. Essentially, that's really what it does. And it's as long as you're not overly going like over 200 square feet or going to that maximum lot coverage where you got too much impervious surface for rainwater runoff, this would be allowable.
Anybody else? Hearing none, please take the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Szymanski,
Yes.
Councilmember Sullivan,
Yes.
Mayor Zelinski,
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton,
Yes.
Councilmember Bachmann,
Yes.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac,
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Consideration of text amendment to the zoning ordinance to address temporary storage structures. In review of the temporary storage structures language in the zoning ordinance, staff proposed modifying the language to the Planning Commission to allow for a temporary structure while still prohibiting the membrane coverage framework temporary structure. Language has been approved by the Planning Commission. And as an ordinance, 2 separate readings are required. If this ordinance is introduced at this time, it could be adopted at the next meeting. At this time, council could take action to introduce zoning ordinance Z21-04 with a proposed text amendment addressing temporary storage structures. Is there a motion?
Szymanski, I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Bachman will second it.
Any discussion?
I'm just wondering what the point of it is.
Okay, so
Sorry, I just
no, this one I was hoping somebody would ask because it makes it sound like we're allowing them, which is really not the case. You guys have temporary storage section 518 temporary storage structures in the ordinance, but there is you guys don't allow for like pod type structures. Those temporary storage structures, when people are moving in or moving out, they're metal structures, so they're not allowable by the current ordinance. We had somebody come through and request, you know, hey, am I allowed to have one of these? And we were like, well, no, you're not. So we felt that, you know, hey, maybe we're being a little bit too restrictive here, and that we should modify the zoning ordinance to allow for them, but still not allow membrane covered ones that you see in like carports or those types of structures or tent structures that you might see within the city. We also wanted to limit them. So like, you know, you don't just have a pod sitting out there in somebody's driveway for, you know, just long periods. So we said that, hey, the longest you can have them in a calendar year is 45 days. That should be plenty of time if you were to move in or move out to have a pod structure within your property. So that's what this does, is it allows for those metal, you know, type pod structures to come in and be moved in within the ordinance, and then while still restricting carports that are membrane covered.
So who's going to pay attention to how long they've been sitting there?
Usually we'll get complaints from residents, and then we'll start modifying. Also, Chief Glass as his patrol officers are going throughout the city, and they take note, you know, hey, this has been here, and you know, if they see it there for a long period of time, we'll write a letter telling them to remove it.
So basically we're going to add to my favorite B word, the blight, and add storage containers to the property so they can store more stuff on the property, move it in 45 days, maybe, and then bring it back.
Well, Ms. Sullivan, this is Mick Szymanski, and as someone who's moved 17 times, these pods are not cheap. So this isn't something that somebody would literally have for long periods of time, but it is a new way of moving where, you know, again, it's very difficult for a truck, for example, you rent it by the day. The pod you rent for 30 days, and it gives you time to be able to pack up your own stuff and move it from your house right into this storage container. And then they come pick up the storage container and move it to your new site. So it's really kind of a modern way of being able to help people move back and forth. And I'm sure that pods didn't exist when the ordinance was written, but I don't think that it'll really add. People aren't going to necessarily put a pod in their side yard just to store stuff. It's like I said, it's really designed for people moving in and moving out.
Well, I understand that. I mean, I sell houses for a living, so I know people that move in and out, but I'm just saying if it's a pod or if it's a metal structure, some people that collect stuff will build a metal structure just so they can add more to their yard.
Well, these are designed to not exceed 40 days or 45 days.
Okay.
They also, if you have if they build a structure, that would be a land use permit to pull it, and you're only allowed to have one structure on your property in most land use districts. There's only one accessory building allowed. So the ones that you see currently that have multiple, you know, if you see them go up, you know, report them to us and we will go and enforce on them, because they're not allowed. That's exceeding the accessory building limit unless they're tied together. And then they would still have to get a land use permit to do so. So I know there's a concern, because I know exactly what you're talking about, where these little metal structures are popping up everywhere. That's another thing with the design standards. They require a foundation as well. So, you know, that might help limit some of these illegal accessory structures that are going out there. And at one time or another, there's some kind of rumor that went out that I think a 10 by 10 or a certain square footage was allowable without a permit. And that is just not true. So if you guys are seeing these go up, then, you know, please report them and we'll come out and enforce on them.
Okay, that makes more sense. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Okay, I think, Grabowski here, I think that when these pop up, you know, a lot of people won't report them in their neighborhood. I think that in the police riding around, I'm going to notice them because things come and go. I think they need to be reported to the police department from the planning committee, any commission, so that the police can go check on them. And the 45 days is more than enough to get them out of there. Thank you.
Anybody else? Hearing none, please take the roll. Was there somebody else? Did I miss somebody? Okay, please take the roll.
Councilmember Sullivan?
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski?
Yes.
Councilmember Bachmann,
Yes.
Mayor Zelinski,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Szymanski,
Yes.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac,
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Consideration of text amendment to the zoning ordinance to address the site plan review committee. To conform with the redevelopment community requirements, the city must identify who serves on the site plan review committee. Staff recognize the need to amend the zoning ordinance to bring the city into compliance. Language has been approved by the Planning Commission. As an ordinance, 2 separate readings are required. If the ordinance is introduced at this time, it could be adopted at the next meeting. At this time, council can take action to introduce zoning ordinance Z21-05 with a proposed text amendment addressing the site plan review committee. Is there a motion?
Grabowski, I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
Szymanski, I'll make a second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please take the roll.
Councilmember Bachmann,
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton,
Yes.
Mayor Zelinski,
Yes.
Councilmember Sullivan,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Szymanski,
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski,
Yes.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Consideration of text amendment to the zoning ordinance to address fences. As of June 16, 2017, the city of Manistee has no longer required permits for constructing fences. Though a permit is not required, it is required that they be constructed with the requirements of section 508 of the zoning ordinance. Staff developed language to clearly outline this within the zoning ordinance. Language has been approved by the Planning Commission. As an ordinance, 2 separate readings are required. If this ordinance is introduced at this time, it could be adopted at the next meeting. At this time, council could take action to introduce zoning ordinance Z21-06 with the proposed text amendments addressing fences. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion, Bachmann.
Is there a second?
Szymanski, I'll make a second.
Any discussion?
Mike, this does not change the requirements for fencing, correct? It just addresses the language and clarifies it within the fencing guidelines. Is that my understanding?
So this, back in June 16th of 2017, you guys passed a policy no longer requiring fences to have a permit. It was never added to the zoning ordinance. So a lot of people weren't aware of that. You know, you didn't have to have a permit for the fence. However, it clearly states in the policy that you guys did pass that they have to conform with section 508, which is fences of the zoning ordinance. So we're just clarifying that, hey, you don't require a land use permit, but you do have to, you know, follow the section 508, which is fences, so, and the regulations within it.
Thank you, Mike. Any other questions? Hearing none, please take the roll.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac,
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Szymanski,
Yes.
Councilmember Sullivan,
Yes.
Mayor Zelinski,
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton,
Yes.
Councilmember Bachmann.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. We have nothing under notices, the communications and announcements. Concerns and comments. Citizens' comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to comment on municipal services, activities, or areas of city involvement. Citizens and attendant visa phones shall be recognized by the city clerk for comments. Limited to 5 minutes. Letters submitted to council will not be publicly read. Each person waiting in the virtual waiting room will be called by the last 4 digits of their telephone number. Heather, do you want to take care of that? And also then just move on to officials and staff and council members?
Sure. We no longer have anybody from the public, so I'm just going to move right on from there. So city manager?
Nothing at this time.
City Attorney?
You're muted, George.
Got it. Sorry. Nothing, Heather. Thank you.
Okay. Finance Director?
Nothing, Heather. Thank you very much.
DPW Director?
Nothing, Heather. Thank you.
Police Chief?
I have nothing, Heather. Thanks.
Let's see. Fire Chief never came back. City Engineer?
Nothing other than looking forward to get rid of SSO 18.
Planning and Zoning?
Nothing, Heather. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Bachman?
Nothing, Heather. Thank you.
Councilmember Beaton?
Not at this time. Nothing. Thanks.
Councilmember Sullivan?
Nothing, thank you.
Councilmember Grabowski?
Yes, for the chief of police, Josh, what are we doing with those burned out houses on Davis Street and then the bar on Kosciuszko Street?
We're waiting to coordinate with the insurance companies as far as getting them demolished. So the check for that goes to the fire chief, and he coordinates with the insurance company to get them demolished.
Okay, because that's, you know, it looks pretty bad with that bar, at the bar sitting down there.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac?
Nothing, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Szymanski?
I have one for Jeff. I had somebody complain about the condition of the bathrooms out at the Reese's Park ball field. And I was wondering, is it possible that those bathrooms be locked when we're not having any games, or is there another issue that I'm not aware of?
Yeah, this is Makula. Well, they're locked during the wintertime right now. All of our public restrooms have electronic locks, so they automatically lock at a prescribed time in the evening, and then they reopen automatically the next morning. And one of the reasons why we did that to all of our restrooms was to try to reduce the amount of vandalism. The bathrooms are public restrooms. They're not just for when there's baseball being played, but that park gets usage for picnicking, and certainly there's the playground there. So, you know, I know that we've had instances of vandalism, but we check them and clean them every day during the summertime.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Zielinski?
I have nothing tonight. Thank you, everybody. I have nothing further. We'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion, Grabowski.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you.